Bungie has recently announced 4 new weapons coming in Season 23 and a new perk. In today's video, we're breaking down the good, the bad, and the ugly for all of these new weapons. Currently in Destiny 2, we have the exotic Strand Trace Rifle, the Navigator, but this will be the very first legendary Strand Trace Rifle, and not only that, it will be the first ever Trace Rifle that will be in the kinetic slot as a legendary, allowing for a ton more unique weapon combinations. Historically, every time I've ever wanted to use a Trace Rifle, it really restricts your loadouts because you have to use it in the energy slot, but with Incisor being in the kinetic slot, this is going to really open up for a lot of new unique opportunities. Now, we don't know exactly what perks this weapon is going to have on it, but understanding how current Trace Rifles work, we can decipher exactly what perks this weapon is going to need to have in order for it to be a meta-defining weapon. But keep in mind that even if it doesn't have these good perks, it's still so unique in that it's the only legendary kinetic Trace Rifle that I think people are still going to use it. On current Trace Rifles in Destiny 2, we see damage perks like Frenzy, Focus Fury, Golden Tricorn, Harmony, Target Lock, Paracausal Affinity, Vorpal, Killing Tally, Swashbuckler. But out of all the damage boosting perks, in my opinion, the best one in PvE, especially for Trace Rifles, is One for All. Trace Rifles having a huge magazine makes it super easy to just hit 3 separate targets, and in doing so you get a 35% boost to damage for a whopping 10 seconds. If this Trace Rifle does have One for All, it will definitely be worth grinding out for the God Roll, but keep in mind that this weapon is actually locked in trials, so be prepared to sweat it out in PvP if this does have that. In the left-hand column for Trace Rifles, there's also some really good perks that it can roll. On other current Trace Rifles in the game right now, we have Reconstruction, Envious Assassin, Lead from Gold, and my personal favorite, which is Shoot to Loot. I love using Shoot to Loot and One for All on my Path of Least Resistance Trace Rifle, and if the new Incisor Trace Rifle has that exact roll, I would be super excited. But there is one perk combination that I think would be even crazier, and that would be Demolitionist plus One for All. I highly doubt Bungie is going to allow for that power creep to happen, but if they did, it would be so good. A Strand Trace Rifle with One for All and benefiting from Strand Surge on pretty much every activity in the game, with Demolitionist, which is basically going to give you your grenade back extremely fast, means that you would have an infinite grenade spam build for any class, any character. It would be really, really powerful. I personally hope that Bungie actually wants us to have that, because that would be super fun, and that would actually get everyone into trials grinding. But knowing Bungie, sometimes when they introduce new weapons of new archetypes into the game, they like to be a little bit stingy. So I also wouldn't be surprised if the best roll was Hipfire Grip Harmony, in which case I probably wouldn't even grind for the God Roll. I would just get one and not really care about it. The next new weapon that Bungie is introducing in Season 23 is called Lethal Abundance. This is going to be a Strand high impact auto rifle and the first of its kind. Currently in the game, we have 3 other Strand auto rifles: Rufus's Fury, which is a 720 RPM and one of my personal favorites in PvE. Then we have the Perpetualis, which is an adaptive frame 600 RPM, also pretty good, but I don't really see as many people using this currently. And lastly, we have the Old Sterling adaptive frame 600 RPM auto rifle. Now, the new Lethal Abundance is again going to be the high impact auto rifle frame, so it's going to be the 360 RPM fire rate, the slowest RPM rate you can get for an auto rifle. I don't see myself using a 360 RPM in PvE, but keep in mind that Bungie is buffing auto rifles, giving them 10% damage increase against red bar enemies in Season 23, so there is some potential there for it to be really strong, especially if it does have some of the right perks. But more than likely, I see this weapon having a perk pool more specific to PvP, especially considering it comes from Iron Banner. Auto rifles are currently performing pretty well inside the Crucible, and with the right perk options on it, I could definitely see this being a top contender, especially if it has good base stats like good base range and good base stability, paired with strong perks like dynamic sway reduction and target lock. With all of that, it could easily make this weapon a top contender in Crucible, at least within the auto rifle category, in my opinion. Now, while the Lethal Abundance might stand a chance at shaking up the meta, at least as a 360 RPM auto rifle, the next weapon we're going to talk about might have no chance at all, and that weapon is called the Undercurrent. It's an arc waveframe breech-loaded grenade launcher, and it has to compete against one of the best in the game, Forbearance. Forbearance as well is an arc waveframe breech-loaded grenade launcher, and it can roll some of the best perks in the game, easily one of the best weapons for ad clear overall. With Unrelenting and Chain Reaction, you can clear an entire mob of ads instantaneously. So in order for the Undercurrent to compete against that, it's gonna have to have some pretty wild perks. So honestly, I don't even know how the Undercurrent is going to compete against that. The only possible role I could imagine this weapon could come with to entice current Destiny players would be something like auto loading and chain reaction. That way you could use this weapon differently than Forbearance. You could shoot it at the ads and then swap to something else, allowing it to auto load for you. We've previously done this in the past with wave frame grenade launchers like the Deafening Whisper, for example, it's a void waveframe grenade launcher that does roll with auto-loading, and honestly, I think I kind of like that more. But even more interesting than auto-loading on a waveframe is the perk Envious Assassin. This perk reloads the weapon based on the number of ad kills you get with other weapons. So for example, you could be running around with a hand cannon, clearing a ton of ads, and then you swap to your waveframe grenade launcher, and if it has Envious Assassin on it, you could have like 10 waveframe GLs in the magazine. This new waveframe grenade launcher could be absolutely crazy if it has Envious Assassin. However, that would potentially be a big argument for power creep. I mean, Forbearance is already one of the best weapons in the game. Giving it essentially better perks than it currently has right now would definitely be pretty crazy, but honestly, I think that's the decision that Bungie should go with, because I'm a big fan of all the new weapons coming out in a new season and being better than previous weapons. It just makes no sense to me to bring out new weapons within a new season, and there's already better versions of those weapons currently in the game. And while that does create an issue of power creep that we've addressed a few times in this video here, I honestly just think that power creep is a necessary evil within the game. You have to give the players better weapons, better armor, better loot every season, every year. Otherwise, there's no incentive to log in and grind out for those new things. Like, to give you a good example, if this new waveframe GL is worse than the Forbearance, then every time this weapon is in rotation next season, I'm never going to grind it. I'm not going to do the Nightfall at all, and neither is a large portion of the Destiny 2 community. Why would you grind for another ARC waveframe grenade launcher when you already have one? And it's crafted and has the exact perfect roll. You're taking a chance at random rolls from the Nightfall for a weapon that's inferior. The only possible solution to this is power creep. You have to make it more powerful, Bungie. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree before we jump into our last weapon on the list here, which is the Chivalric Fire. This will be the first ever Void Caster sword. Bungie is boasting that it's going to have a perk combination like Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds, which will give a high uptime to Void Overshields. And while that is true, that also means that you have to use your sword in order to ad clear, which historically has not really been the best. I imagine when you put this thing on with the right perk combination, you will be able to clear a room of ads, and there probably will be certain scenarios where that might be beneficial. Like for example, if you're doing an encounter that doesn't have a boss, oftentimes I find myself using a machine gun just for ad clear, and it's in those situations that I could potentially use this Void Caster sword. However, I should say very clearly that these things have not been good throughout the history of Destiny, and I don't know if it's going to be a meta weapon in the future, but I'm highly doubting it. Bungie's trying to hype this one up a lot though. They're saying, you know, they can do all these crazy things. It has these crazy perk combinations. They even threw in here that it's the first ever Void Caster sword, and it has a new perk on it called Attrition Orbs, which is dealing sustained damage creates an orb of power. And while that might be good for orb generation, I don't know if that's going to be the best for boss damage. These caster swords cannot compete with some of the meta swords currently in the game, and you know exactly what sword I'm going to reference, the Bequest, which absolutely tears through Crota, especially when you have Enhanced Surrounded on it. I find it highly unlikely that we will end up using these Void Caster swords unless they get some sort of crazy substantial buff that makes them the meta finally in Destiny 2, and honestly I'm all for that. I like to see a shift within the meta, so maybe it's time for Bungie to buff these Void Casters. Maybe it's time for a Void Caster sword meta in Destiny 2. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that, and comment your thoughts down below on which of the 4 new weapons coming in Season 23 are you looking forward to the most. Hopefully Season 23, which is the next season, is a good one. I'm cautiously optimistic, obviously, given due to the Bungie layoffs and everything, and as much as I hate to say it, this season in Destiny 2 has actually been really good overall, and I talk about that in much more depth in this video right here, so click on the screen right here to watch that video. And if you're feeling thirsty out there, make sure to use code LUCKY10P to save some money on G Fuel. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitch and Kick. I go live all the time playing Destiny 2. Lastly, make sure you're following me on X, Instagram, and TikTok, where I deliver Destiny 2 news to you daily. I appreciate all the followers out there.